The Silent Watchers, the galaxy had rules. Some were written in treaties, carved into metal, or burned into the memories of starfaring species. But the most important rule was never spoken aloud. It was older than most civilizations, older than the great wars that had shaped the spiral arms. The rule was simple: never disturb a world that has split the atom. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching Earth turn slowly beneath her. The blue marble looked peaceful from up here. No signs of the nuclear weapons that had kept her world safe for 70 years. No hint of the invisible shield that protected humanity from the vast darkness beyond. She didn't know about the rule. None of them did. Far beyond the edge of the solar system, in the cold void between stars, something watched. The Kethmori Empire had been observing Earth for decades, studying its primitive inhabitants with growing contempt. They saw a species that fought amongst itself, that poisoned its own world, that had barely managed to reach its own moon. The humans looked weak, disorganized, ripe for conquest. General Dekmar stood in the command center of the flagship Dominator. His forearms crossed as he studied the tactical display. The blue world hung in the center, surrounded by data streams and analysis reports. His species had conquered 47 worlds in the last century alone. This would be 48. The primitive nuclear weapons pose no threat to our shields, his science officer reported. Their space capabilities are laughable. They have no orbital defenses, no energy weapons, no faster-than-light travel. This will be over in days. Dekmar nodded, his black eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The Kethmori were apex predators, their empire spanning 12 star systems. They had never lost a war, never retreated, never shown mercy. The humans would learn this quickly. Signal the fleet, he commanded. Begin the approach. And ignore that ancient nonsense about nuclear worlds. Superstition has no place in warfare. The first mistake was thinking superstition and wisdom were the same thing. Elena was reviewing maintenance reports when every alarm on the station started screaming at once. The hull shuddered. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red. Through the observation windows, she saw them. Ships, massive, dark shapes that blotted out the stars. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls gleaming with energy fields that bent light around them. Control, this is ISS. We have multiple unknown contacts. Repeat, we have unknown contacts in Earth orbit. Static answered her. The communication arrays were dead. The GPS satellites had gone dark. One by one, humanity's eyes and ears in space were being systematically destroyed. Below them, the real horror began. The Kethmori didn't bother with warnings or demands. They simply began shooting. Lance beams of coherent energy stabbed down from orbit, turning cities into glass. New York's skyline vanished in a pillar of white fire. London became a crater. Beijing disappeared in superheated plasma. The attack was surgical, precise, designed to break human will in the first hour. They had studied human psychology. They knew fear. They knew despair. What they didn't understand was rage. Elena watched her world burn from 300 miles above. She watched the station's escape pods launch automatically, carrying her crewmates to a planet that might not exist by the time they landed. She should have been afraid, should have been crying. Instead, she felt something cold and sharp growing. In her chest, the Kethmori had made their second mistake. They had left her alive. The invasion lasted 3 days. 3 days of orbital bombardment of landing craft disgorging alien soldiers, of human governments collapsing like houses of cards. The world's militaries tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for fighting other humans, against energy shields and plasma cannons. Tanks and jets were toys, but humanity had one advantage the Kethmori hadn't counted on. When you back a pack animal into a corner, it doesn't just bare its teeth, it calls for help. Alina crashed the station's emergency pod in the mountains of Colorado. She should have died in the impact. Instead, she crawled out with 3 broken ribs and a head full of fury. The nearby town was gone, turned to ash and twisted metal. But in the ruins, she found survivors. Always survivors. "You military?" asked a man with burns covering half his face. His name tag read, Rodriguez Fire. Chief, he held a fire axe in one hand and a dead alien's weapon in the other. Navy. Flight commander, Alina said, checking the alien rifle. The weapon was warm, almost alive. You figured out how to use their guns. Rodriguez managed a grim smile. My daughter's a engineering student, was she took one apart before. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. That's how the Ghost Protocol began. Not with grand strategies or government orders, but with a woman who had watched her world burn and decided to burn back. Alina gathered the survivors, the soldiers without armies, the scientists without labs, the engineers without blueprints. They had nothing but rage and the wreckage of 2 civilizations. It was enough. Dr. Marcus Chen had been studying xenobiology at Stanford when the beams fell. He survived because he was in the basement when the campus turned to glass. Now he sat in a mine shaft in Nevada, surrounded by alien technology and human ingenuity. The Kethmori weapons weren't just tools, they were puzzles, and puzzles could be solved. Their energy source is quantum coupled, he explained to Alina over a crackling radio. Each weapon is linked to their ships. But the coupling works both ways. We can trace the signal back. Alina understood immediately. We can find their bases. Better than that, we can turn their own weapons against them. The first Ghost Protocol strike happened 2 weeks after the invasion. A Kethmori patrol was sweeping through the ruins of Denver when their weapons simply stopped working. The soldiers barely had time to look confused before the humans emerged from the rubble, carrying reprogrammed alien rifles. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. General Thekma watched the tactical display with growing concern. Red markers showed patrol losses, communication blackouts, equipment failures. The humans were supposed to be broken, scattered, defeated. Instead, they were adapting, learning, fighting back with their own weapons. How is this possible? He demanded. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs. His science officer's skin had turned pale grey, a sign of fear in his species. General, I've been analyzing the combat reports. The humans aren't just using our weapons, they're improving them, modifying them, making them more efficient. Dechma's blood ran cold. In 47 conquests, no species had ever reverse-engineered Kethmori technology. Most barely understood fire when they arrived, but humans, humans were different. They're not just primitive, his officer continued. They're savage. They take prisoners only to study our biology. They've learned to track our communication frequencies. They're using our own supply drops against us. The reports kept coming. A Kethmori supply depot, gone. A communication relay, turned into a bomb. A landing craft, reprogrammed and sent back to the fleet filled with human explosives. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were learning faster than any species in galactic history. Alina stood in what had once been a shopping mall, now converted into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with red circles showing Kethmori positions and blue arrows, showing human movements. She had aged 10 years in 10 weeks, but her eyes still burned with purpose. "Status report," she called out. "Ghost Team 7 took out the Seattle relay," Rodriguez reported. "Ghost Team 12 is in position to hit the Portland staging area. We've got 17 teams active across the continent. Ammunition, plenty. We're using their own supply drops against them. Every weapon we take, we reverse engineer. Every soldier we capture, we learn from." Alina nodded. The Ghost Protocol wasn't just about fighting back. It was about evolution. Every encounter made them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. The Kethmori had wanted to conquer humanity. Instead, they had created something new. Dr. Chun's voice crackled over the radio. "Alina, you need to see this. I've been analyzing their communication protocols. They're not just talking to each other. They're talking to someone else. Someone watching from outside the system." Alina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Who, I don't know. But whoever they are, they're not happy. The Kethmori are in trouble. Big trouble. That night, Alina stood on the roof of their makeshift base, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, alien ships burned with human fire. Somewhere up there, an empire was learning that humanity wasn't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something else entirely. The third mistake was thinking they could leave. General Thekma stood before the communication screen, his forearms trembling with barely controlled fear. The holographic image of the Council of Ancients filled the display, their faces carved from shadow and disappointment. "You were warned," the lead ancient spoke, his voice like grinding stone. "The silent protocol exists for a reason. Nuclear species are quarantined for a reason. You have awakened something that should have slept." "They are primitives," Thekma protested. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. We can still win this war." War. The ancient's laugh was like breaking glass. "You think this is war? You have done something far worse than start a war. General, you have created a teacher." The transmission cut out, leaving Vecma staring at empty space. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to process the incoming reports. Another base fallen, another patrol missing, another ship sending distress signals that cut off mid-transmission. The humans weren't just fighting anymore, they were hunting. Elena's latest report sat on her desk, written in her own handwriting, but barely recognizable as human language. Technical specifications for alien weapons, tactical analysis of enemy movements, psychological profiles of different Kethmori subspecies. In 6 months, she had learned more about warfare than most generals learned in a lifetime. But the most disturbing part was what she was becoming. The woman who had watched her world burn was gone. In her place was something harder, colder, more focused, something that looked at alien prisoners not as people, but as sources of information, something that planned battles like chess games, moving human lives like pieces on a board. The Ghost Protocol had evolved too. From scattered survivors, they had become a network of cells spread across the globe. Each cell was independent, deadly. They shared information, resources, tactics, but most importantly, they shared purpose. The Kethmori had to pay. All of them. "Ma'am," Rodriguez approached her desk, his face grim. "We've got a problem. The aliens are pulling back." "All of them," They're abandoning their ground positions and retreating to orbit. Alina looked up from her reports. Retreating, not retreating, regrouping. Our intelligence suggests they're planning something big, something final. Alina stood up, her mind already working through the possibilities. The Kethmori weren't the type to give up. If they were pulling back, it meant they were planning to end this war with one massive strike, probably orbital bombardment. Turn the entire planet into glass and start over. Get me Chen, she ordered, and prep the teams. If they want to play God, let's show them what happens when you mess with the devil. The message that went out to every Ghost Protocol cell was simple. The enemy is moving to final phase. Execute Protocol 7. No survivors. Protocol 7 wasn't about defense. It wasn't about resistance. It was about making sure that even if humanity lost, the Kethmori would never forget the price of victory. As Alina watched the teams mobilize, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Not satisfaction, not hope, something darker. Something that made her understand why the galaxy had rules about nuclear species. Some things were better left undisturbed. The price of defiance. The orbital bombardment began at dawn. But this time it was different. Instead of precise strikes against cities, the Kethmori fleet unleashed everything they had. Continents burned, oceans boiled. The very atmosphere screamed as energy beams carved through it like knives. General Dekma watched from the bridge of his flagship, his 4 arms steady now. The decision had been made. Humanity would be exterminated completely. Every last one of them. The planet would be sterilized, then reseeded with a more manageable species. The Council of Ancients would be angry, but they would understand. Some threats had to be eliminated completely. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. The humans are launching something. Dekma's eyes narrowed. Impossible. We destroyed their space capabilities in the first week. Not human technology, sir. Ours. They're using our own equipment against us. The first missile broke through the atmosphere like a needle through silk. It was crude, obviously human-made, but powered by a Kethmori reactor core. Behind it came another, then another. Dozens of improvised rockets, each one carrying a payload that made Dekma's blood freeze. They're targeting our supply ships, the tactical officer said, his voice tight with fear. They're not trying to destroy the fleet. They're trying to strand us here. Elena stood in the command bunker 2 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Ghost Protocol had spent months preparing for this moment. Every captured Kethmori reactor, every stolen piece of equipment, every ounce of alien technology had been converted into weapons, but not weapons of war. Weapons of attrition. Direct hit on Supply Vessel 7, Rodriguez reported. That's their fuel depot, gone. Hit on Vessel 12, their ammunition, transport. Hit on Vessel 3, their food production ship. Alina nodded. The humans couldn't match the Kethmori in direct combat, but they could make sure the aliens had nowhere to go. No supplies, no reinforcements, no escape. How long can they last? She asked Dr. Chen, based on their consumption patterns. 6 months, maybe less if they keep up the bombardment. Alina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we wait, and we learn. The siege of Earth lasted 8 months. 8 months of the Kethmori fleet trapped in orbit, slowly running out of supplies while the planet below burned. 8 months of human survivors emerging from deep bunkers to scavenge alien technology. 8 months of the Ghost Protocol learning, adapting, evolving. But humanity wasn't the only thing evolving. Captain Zethfa had been a loyal soldier of the Kethmori Empire for 20 years. He had participated in 17 conquests, had seen 47 species kneel before his people's superior technology. He had never questioned orders, never doubted the righteousness of his cause. Now he stood in the observation deck of his cruiser, watching the planet below with growing dread. The humans had stopped trying to shoot them down. Instead, they were doing something worse. They were learning. "Sir," his communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's in our language." Zethfa turned, his skin pale with shock. "That's impossible. The humans don't speak Kethmori. They do now, sir. The message is for you specifically." The transmission crackled to life, and a human voice spoke perfect Kethmori with the accent of the military caste. "Captain Zethfa of the cruiser Dominion. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Human Resistance. We need to talk." Zethfa stared at the communication panel. "How do you know my name?" "We know everything about you, Captain. Your service record, your family on the homeworld. Your daughter's name is Cathala. She's studying xenobiology at the Imperial Academy. She wants to follow in your footsteps." The blood drained from Zethfa's face. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because we've been listening to your communications for months. We've learned your language, your customs, your military protocols. We know your fleet is running out of supplies. We know your general is planning to sacrifice half the fleet to ensure the other half can escape. We know you're all going to die up there." Zethfa's hands shook as he gripped the communication console. "What do you want?" "To make you an offer. Land your ship. Surrender your crew. In exchange, we'll let you live. We'll even help you get home to your daughter, and if I refuse..." Elena's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of mountains. "Then you'll die up there with the rest of them, and your daughter will never know what happened to her father." The transmission cut out, leaving Zethfa alone with his thoughts. Around him, his crew worked frantically to maintain systems that were slowly failing. The humans weren't just waiting for them to die. They were actively helping the process along. That night, Zethfa did something he had never done before. He called his daughter. "Father," Cathala's voice was full of joy and worry. "The news says you're fighting primitives on some backwater world. When will you come home?" Zethfa looked out at the burning planet below, at the human cities that refused to stay dead, at the improvised weapons that kept reaching up to scratch at his fleet. "Soon, daughter, very soon." But he wasn't sure if it was true. The first defection happened a week later. A Kethmori transport ship descended through the atmosphere, its weapons powered down, its shields lowered. It landed in the ruins of what had once been Denver, and Captain Zethfa stepped out to meet Elena Vasquez face to face. She was smaller than he had expected. Humans were tiny compared to the Kethmori, barely reaching his chest. But her eyes held something that made him step back. Not fear, not anger. Something deeper. Something that whispered of dark spaces and patient hunting. "You came," she said in perfect Kethmori. "I wasn't sure you would. I had little choice. My fleet is dying. My general has ordered us to fight to the last soldier. I have a daughter to think about." Elena nodded. "We know. We've been monitoring your communications with her. She sounds lovely." Zethfa's forearms tensed. "If you harm her, we won't. That's not how we work. We're not conquerors, Captain. We're survivors. There's a difference. She led him through the ruins of the city, past human survivors who watched him with eyes that held no hatred, only calculation. They were studying him, learning from him, even as they spoke. Your people broke an ancient law, Alina said as they walked. The silent protocol. Nuclear species are supposed to be left alone. Do you know why? Zephyr shook his head. General Vecma said it was superstition, primitive fear. Alina stopped walking and turned to face him. It's not superstition. It's wisdom. Nuclear species are dangerous, not because of their weapons, but because of what they become when pushed to the edge. We don't just fight back. We adapt. We evolve. We become something new. She gestured to the ruins around them. This isn't our world anymore. It's something else, something harder, something that remembers what you did to us. As if summoned. By her words, the ground began to tremble, not with explosions or weapons, but with something deeper, something rhythmic, like a heartbeat. What is that? Zephyr asked. The planet, Alina said simply. It's alive now, connected. Every human settlement, every resistance cell, every piece of technology we've captured and modified, it's all part of the same system, the same organism. Zephyr stared at her in horror. You've turned your world into a weapon. No, we've turned ourselves into something that can't be conquered. Something that learns from every attack, grows stronger. From every defeat, your people wanted to rule us. Instead, they created us. The sky above them began to change. Not with clouds or weather, but with something else. Patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with the ground. The entire planet was speaking in a language that had never existed before. The Council of Ancients is coming, Alina said, her voice barely audible above the planet's song. They're the ones who created the silent protocol. They're the ones who tried to protect you from us. Zephyr looked up at the impossible sky. Protect us from what we become when we're pushed too far, from what we become when we stop being human and start being something else. The ships appeared without warning, sliding out of hyperspace, like shadows made solid. They were old, older than the Kethmori Empire, older than most civilizations. The Council of Ancients had finally arrived to judge what had been done. General Dekmar stood on his bridge, watching the ancient ships take position around his fleet. His tactical display showed weapons that made his own arsenal look like toys, energy signatures that bent reality around them, technology that he couldn't even comprehend. General, his communications officer said, voice shaking, we're being hailed by the lead ancient ship. Put it through. The holographic display, filled with shadows and starlight. The ancient who appeared was old beyond measure, his face carved from the space between stars. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of eons. General Vecma, you have violated the silent protocol. You have awakened what should have slept. You have created an abomination. They were primitives, Dekmar protested. Barely evolved. We were bringing them into the galactic community. You were destroying them. And in doing so, you have transformed them into something far worse than primitives. You have made them into teachers. The ancient's image shifted, showing the planet below. But it wasn't the burning world that Kamar remembered. It was something else. Something that pulsed with alien intelligence. Something that watched back. The humans are no longer human, the ancient continued. They have become something new. Something that learns from conflict, grows from pain, evolves from defeat. They are what every species becomes when pushed beyond the breaking point. They are the reason the silent protocol exists. Alina stood in the command center, watching the ancient ships position themselves around the Kethmori fleet. She could feel the planet's awareness flowing through her, connecting her to every human survivor, every piece of technology, every heartbeat of the new world they had created. "They're going to destroy the Kethmori fleet," Dr. Chen reported. "The ancients are powering up their weapons." "No," Alina said quietly. "They're going to let us do it." The planet's song grew louder, more complex. Across the surface, human settlements began to activate systems they had never used before. Weapons that had been grown rather than built. Technology that lived and breathed and hungered. "We have a choice," Alina said to the resistance leaders, gathered around her. "We can let the ancients clean up this mess, or we can show them what we've become." Rodriguez looked at her with eyes that held no recognition. The man who had pulled survivors from burning buildings was gone. In his place was something else, something that calculated odds and measured revenge. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Alina smiled, and for the first time in months, there was something human in it. "We let them go, all of them. The Kethmori, the ancients, everyone. We let them spread the word about what Earth has become, about what happens when you break the oldest rule in the galaxy." The transmission that went out to every ship in orbit was simple and clear. It was broadcast in every known galactic language, on every frequency, with enough power to reach neighboring star systems. "This is Earth. We are awake. We are changed. We are no longer the species you remember. The silent protocol is hereby reinstated. Any species that violates it will learn what the Kethmori have learned. You are not welcome here. You are not wanted here. Earth is closed." The message continued for 7 minutes, but the meaning was clear in the first 7 seconds. Humanity had evolved beyond recognition. They were no longer victims to be conquered or primitives to be uplifted. They were something new, something that remembered every slight, learned from every defeat, grew stronger from every attack. The Kethmori fleet departed within hours, their remaining ships fleeing to the outer system. The ancients watched them go, then turned their attention to the planet below. "What have you become?" the lead ancient asked, his transmission directed at Alina specifically. She stood on the roof of her command center, looking up at the stars with eyes that held the light of 1,000 burning cities. "We've become what you were afraid we would become. We've become the reason rules exist." And now Alina was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the planet hummed with alien intelligence. In the ruins of every city, human survivors worked to build something new, something that would never be conquered again. "Now we wait," she said finally. "We watch, we learn, and we make sure that what happened here never happens again to anyone." The ancient ships departed without another word, carrying with them the story of Earth's transformation, the story of what happens when an ancient law is broken, the story of why some species are better left alone. Alina stood alone on the roof, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere up there, the galaxy was learning a new rule, a rule written in fire and blood and the screams of a dying world. Earth was no longer silent, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the years that followed, the story of Earth's transformation spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Kethmori Empire fell within a decade, their military broken, their confidence shattered. Other species looked at the burned world hanging in space and whispered warnings to their children. Never disturb a world that has split the atom. Never wake what sleeps in the darkness between stars. Never underestimate the price of evolution. The silent protocol was no longer just a rule. It was a promise, a guarantee that some things were better left undisturbed. And in the ruins of Earth, something new grew from the ashes, something that watched the stars with patient eyes and remembered the cost of breaking ancient laws. Humanity had died in the first week of the invasion. What survived was something else entirely, something that would ensure the galaxy never forgot the price of defiance.